overview held today, which is Thursday the 10th of November 2022. We have a pretty comprehensive agenda this afternoon with two key items on which I'll come to in just a minute. But I will say, just ahead of taking apologies and minutes and disclosure, that we do have some guests with us today. So I'd like to welcome the heads and governors from the COCIT Partnership this afternoon. So now, if we can just move on to apologies for absence, please.
Yes, Chair, I've received apologies from Councillor Fairless, Aitken, Alan Hodgson, Lynn Houghton and Paul Rickard. Thank you.
If we can then move on to the minutes of the last meeting, which are in your agenda report, pages 1 to 6. There is one item which I know was flagged at the last full council. Councillor Swinburne's name is recorded incorrectly, which we can correct. Are there any other items of accuracy on pages 1 to 6 of the minutes of the previous meeting? I'm not seeing any hands there. So on the basis of that change to Councillor Swinburne's correct, I'll sign those off as a true and accurate record. Moving on to item number 3 on the agenda is disclosure of members' interests. We all have signed our members' interests, but is there anything additional that any member wishes to raise ahead of this afternoon's meeting? And I'm not seeing any indication of that. So on that basis, I will move on to a standard item on the agenda, which is the forward plan of key decisions. Chris Angus, you're going to take us through pages 7 to 18.
Thanks, Chair. Forward plan is for on there that is going to Cabinet that isn't already on the facts work programme. The two substantive reports that are here today will be going to Cabinet on the 17th of November, along with the committee's comments.
Thank you for that. So we now move on to one of two substantive agenda items this afternoon for us as a scrutiny committee. And for the purposes of anyone watching from home, we're not a decision-making body. We scrutinise. We scrutinise decisions. We make any changes, recommendations, which then go to Cabinet for them as ultimate decision makers. So on the report this afternoon, from pages 19 to 222 on your agenda papers, is a Cabinet report which is the outcome of statutory consultation on proposals for the COCIT Partnership. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let Sue Avison take the report, and then I'm going to bring in Audrey Kingham, who is joining us online this afternoon. Audrey will come in after Sue has spoken to add a few additional pointers. So Sue, if I can ask you to take us through the substantive report this afternoon.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. Yes, I think FACS members will be well aware of the process we've been undertaken so far in regard to consultation within the COCIT Partnership. But this report sets out the final analysis of representations and responses received during the 4 weeks statutory consultation on the proposals to change the age ranges of all the first schools and James Calvert Spence College, as well as responses relating to the statutory proposal to expand Barndale Special School and also open a satellite provision in Amble. Background information is contained within the report in paragraphs 9 to 13. And again, as I've already made you aware, as this is the third report been presented to members since May 2022 in relation to these proposals, I'm sure you're all aware of the detail and the journey we've already been on. However, members are reminded that this consultation has taken place in response to the request from all the schools within the COCIT Partnership to carry out this wider consultation and now come to its final conclusion. Again, the consultation process is set out in paragraphs 14 and 15 of your report, but just to highlight that the statutory proposals were in relation to the reorganisation of schools in the COCIT Partnership and for the increased planned admission number into Barndale Special School, Again, the consultation documents were drafted in accordance with the school organisation regulations, as well as being published on the Council's website from the 22nd of September. And again, copies of the detailed statutory proposals are contained as appendices 1 and 2 of this report. It should also be noted that a link to the copy of the proposal was also sent directly to parents of all the pupils on roll at the Barndale Special School, as is required within the DFE guidance. The publication of the 2 statutory proposals were open for 4 weeks, which again is the statutory period, during which time interested parties were invited to submit written comments in the form of representations, either in support or objecting to the proposals, and all responses needed to be received by the 20th of October at midnight. Again, the representations and responses received in relation to statutory proposals are contained within your report. But again, FACS members should note the purpose of the statutory consultation was to seek the views of interested parties on a qualitative basis in relation to the robustness of the proposals educationally in order to form a decision-making, in order to form the decision-making process of the Council's Cabinet. Therefore, it is not intended that these results are used as a referendum. During the period of statutory consultation, we did receive 7 representations. And again, these were from all the governing bodies within the COCUT partnership. All 6 first schools of the governing bodies and their head teachers supported the statutory proposal to expand the age ranges of their schools. And again, a summary from each school's response is contained in paragraph 18 of the report. The response from James Calvert Spence governing body states that they are committed to the current structure of James Calvert Spence College, but they understand that they now must consider other options on how education in the partnership is structured, and have stated, whatever the outcome, that the governors and leadership of James Calvert Spence will work tirelessly to make the system a success, and their focus is on providing the best possible education outcomes for the children in their community. And they want to work with the whole partnership to unite the whole partnership in whichever education system. In relation to the statutory proposal for Barndale Special School, 1 representation was received from the governing body, and the governing body again support the Council's statutory proposal to increase the number of pupils on the roll of their school through the creation of a satellite provision in Amble. We also received a response from the Newcastle Diocesan Education Board, who submitted joint representation in respect to both statutory proposals, and the board fully support the move to a 2-tier organisation of schools, as well as the investment in the church schools, as well as providing agreeing to the approval of the SEN provision being placed in the COCUT partnership. The proposals, models and implications of the statutory proposals are contained in paragraphs 23 to 31 of your report, and these cover the transport, travel and accessibility, community cohesion and impact equality assessment, as well as diversity of provision. The timeline for the implementation of the statutory proposal is set out in paragraphs 32, which would see the first schools expand their age range in a phased way, starting from the 1st of September 2024, when all Year 4 pupils would remain in their first schools to become primary and become the first Year 5 cohort, and then would be retained again from September 2025 to become the first Year 6 group. For James Calvert Spence, again, those proposals would mean that they would not receive a Year 5 intake in September 2024, but would operate from Year 6 to 13 on the Acklington Road site. And then from September 2025 and subsequent years, the school would have a final age range of 11 to 18 years, and therefore only taking in a Year 7 at that transition point. Implications for staff are set out in paragraph 34 of the report, which describes how the future employment of those staff potentially affected by any reorganisation would be protected. Also to note that should the proposal to create a satellite provision for Barndale Special School be approved, additional staff would also be required to meet the additional needs of students. There are no proposals to change any catchment areas of schools, and again this is set out in paragraphs 36 and 37 of your report. In terms of special educational needs, apart from the proposal to increase specialist provision for the partnership, students may also benefit, those students, with SEN may also benefit from remaining within their primary schools for 2 more years. In terms of the cost implications of home to school transport, again, the in a small saving to the transport budget as pupils will remain in their primary schools for 2 additional years. It is anticipated that the provision of local specialist provision within the COCUT partnership would also reduce the need for many students travelling outside of their local area, and therefore would also have a positive impact on the council's home to school transport costs. Other implications, again, we talk about sport and recreation, those details are set out in paragraph 41. This confirms that there would be no negative impact on the current sport and recreation facilities at the current first school sites as they are proposed to become primaries. There would, however, be a positive impact for Amble First School as they don't currently have any on-site grass playing fields for their children, but when they relocate to the primary school that would be established on the South Avenue site, they will have access to grass pitches for sport. There would also be a positive impact on sport and recreation on the James Calvert Spence College site with the proposed improvements to sports facilities for the school and for the wider community, including a full-size 3G pitch, new running track and enhanced access arrangements to sports hall, changing facilities and grass playing pitches. Therefore, these proposals would have a positive impact on sport and recreation within the Amble area. Building implications, again, are set out in the report, and you'll see there are costs detailed there to achieve the reorganisation. Full details are set out in Table 5 in the report, which has, again, you will note, has included an increased estimated cost that now brings the budget to £39.06 million to achieve the changes suggested within the report. The increased costs are as a result of increasing of the scope, which now include a 50-place special school, new build school for James Calvert Spence, a mobile classroom replacement. The cost estimate also allows for predicted inflation rates that are currently being experienced and have been estimated based on a midpoint during the construction. The additional funding required to deliver the project is set out in Table 6 and proposes to use an additional £11.5 million of external grants, as well as allocating £2 million of council resources, which will be funded through savings achieved against a budget for the Astley New Builds project. Again, there are some decisions for Cabinet in relation to an outline business case that has been developed for the investment for new buildings for James Calvert Spence. So again, due to the level of investment proposed for James Calvert Spence College, both in their buildings and site, officers, together with specialist technical advisors, have developed an outline business case that sets out the options to achieve the best value for the council's investment. The outline business case, attached as appendices 3 of your report, sets out an option appraisal that looked at 5 options that were considered, together with a full commercial appraisal of each of the options. And again, this is contained in section 5 of the outline business case. As set out in recommendation 5, it is recommended to proceed with the option to provide new buildings for James Calvert Spence on land to the east of the recreation ground, as detailed within the outline business case, and we're also seeking Cabinet's approval to proceed on that basis with detailed design and the submission of a planning application for the project within the approved budget of £25.7 million. So in conclusion, the proposals for the reorganisation of the COCUT partnership to a 2-tier structure. While only representations from the schools in the COCUT partnership and from the Diocesan Education Board have been received during this statutory period, all the first school and the primary schools are supportive of the proposal to move to a two-tier primary-secondary structure. And while the governing body of James Calvert Spence have also given its commitment to work closely with other schools for the benefit of children and young people in the COCUT area, and in absence of any contrary information, it must be assumed that the parents and the wider community of the COCUT area are content for the reorganisation of their local schools to proceed. It should also be remembered that while the responses from parents and the general public were relatively low during the informal consultation process, they were overwhelmingly in favour of the move to a primary-secondary structure, with 92% of those that responded at that time were actually in support of the proposal. In terms of the proposal to increase the pupil numbers at Barndale Special School, again, only the governing body of Barndale did, and as well as the Education Diocesan Board, responded to the statutory proposal to create the satellite provision. However, both the governing body and the Diocesan Board are very supportive of the proposal to create the local specialism for children with primary needs in the COCUT area, and therefore, again, there was overwhelming support at the informal stage of consultation for this proposal. Is therefore officers are recommending to approve the implementation of the statutory proposal to reorganise the COCUT partnership to a two-tier structure with the effect from the 1st of September 2024, and also recommending the approval of the statutory proposal for Barndale Special School to increase its capacity in the form of a satellite provision on the site in South Avenue, again from the 1st of September 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And I want to bring in now Audrey King, Director of Education, just to add to the report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hoping everybody can hear me nice and clearly. Just to say that there has been a huge amount of work undertaken to get us to this stage, and I'd really like to commend the schools and governing bodies and chairs of governors and head teachers really working together to come together for a solution for all of the children in the COCUT partnership. It has been a phenomenal effort. Everybody's worked hard. Everybody has ask the right questions and sometimes some of the difficult questions, but that's been the right thing to do and got the answers. And so I really wanted FACS to understand that that was very much valued from the officer's perspective, and to allow you to recognise that commendation for their schools who have been significantly involved in the work to get to this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Right, so we've heard the report. There are 6 recommendations. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open this up to members of the Scrutiny Committee for your comments, observations, thoughts. Do I have anyone who wishes to speak on this? So Councillor Watson, first of all.
Hi, Sue. I remember very well Blythe when it went from the 3-tier to the 2-tier. And obviously we got a lot of new schools there, exception of Croftway, which had some extra classrooms. So I think I'm looking at it as in the 5 first schools will have some extra classrooms, and the way I've looked between the 2 reports is that Amble Links First School looks like an additional 72 places, Broomhill an additional 30, Red Row an additional 90, and Grangeview an additional 60. So that makes sense in terms of some of the additional classrooms, apart from the Grangeview one, which obviously if it's 60 extra, it just has the 1 classroom. So I think my question is, do we feel the additional accommodation is adequate in the long term? And are we confident that the budget enables the changes that need to be done are done properly first time round? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, in terms of Grangeview, there was already additional capacity at the school and a spare classroom currently being used as a staff room. So the new extension will include 1 classroom extension as well as some provision for the staff to replace the classroom they're currently using. In terms of the budget, yeah, we've done quite a lot of work in terms of desktop work. There is still some work to do to engage the individual schools in some more detailed design, but we feel the set at the minute is robust to achieve the work that needs to be undertaken. Obviously, you'll be aware the statutory guidance is we do need to be really clear that Cabinet are making a decision not only to make the changes, but they need to be fully in support and aware that there's the funding that would need to take place to do that. You're right, we're not building a new school for every school in the partnership. I think we're in a very different what we were when we converted Blythe schools. But on top of the, other work that we do is obviously we've still got an ongoing maintenance budget where we would still invest in our schools, doing the work that needed to be done in terms of maintenance. We may even still take some opportunities as we develop the detail to do some of that maintenance work while we're on site doing the extension works. But again, that's the day work. That doesn't need a separate approval, but that work will develop over the next few months as we get into the detailed planning. Okay, thanks.
Okay. That's answered your question. Councillor Dale.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the report. I'm just going down the same route, really. Just with the addition of the 2 extra school years and the changes in the school's funding formula, which seems to go on and on and on, will the schools have, I'm really probably talking likewise about the smaller schools, will they have enough funding to provide the actual curriculum that's required for the new 2 years? That's for the teachers, really.
Yeah. So the way that we've done it probably over the last 15 years, I think, in terms of funding schools, then yes, we assume that every child in year 4 would stay on for year 5. So they would get funded to the maximum number. That's additional revenue funding that would go into the schools for them to obviously set their own curriculum. Be funded for the additional pupils that will give them the extra funding to employ the staff and deliver the curriculum that they need to.
Just in addition, we do have in other partnerships primary schools that operate well with a really high quality of education and also within their budgets that are actually smaller than some of these schools are proposed to be. That doesn't mean it's easy to do. But it is clearly possible, it is demonstrated in Northumberland that smaller primary schools than this remain very successful in Northumberland and within their budget.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got Councillor Ball who's indicated she wants to speak.
Thanks, Chair. So as much as I welcome any investment in education, I do have a few concerns. I'll always be worried about going from a 3-tier to 2 system and just about the outcomes for young people in the transitions. But one of my big concerns, obviously we're seeing in the press about costs of schools and how they might be going down to 4-day weeks, teachers potentially going on strike. Where we're going to find the teachers for the extra capacity? These extra classrooms, have they been budgeted into running costs? Because obviously more classrooms, more space also means more cost long term as well. So I do have just a few concerns around that area. If you could reassure me, that would be delightful.
I think I need a different job, Councillor Ball, if I'm going to give you that. Yeah, I think we're all, pressures are great on everybody, aren't they, in the current climate, in terms of school budgets, but that's not just because of reorganisation. That is across, obviously across the whole of Northumberland, and that does bring some challenges for everyone. In terms of, again, I think it's a very similar answer as to Councillor Dale's question is, the more children that you have in the school, the more financially that brings in additional revenue to schools. As you'll be aware, we've talked about the national funding formula, and it's very much now about the numbers of children that stay on at school, stay in schools that generate more income for schools. So again, through schools growing and becoming primary schools, they've got more children actually attending school and therefore boosting their budgets. The challenges will still be there as they are for every other school in the current economic climate, and we wait to find out what our Northumberland final settlement will be in terms of our revenue budgets for the coming financial year. We won't know about that probably until the last week of term. It's normally the last week, probably the weekend in 23rd of December is when we're likely to receive that settlement. You'll be getting a report into fact scrutiny in January and through to Cabinet to talk a little bit more about about that budget and some budget modelling that we're currently doing that's going to go to Schools Forum next week. So we'll be able to talk to you in more broad terms in January as the picture is evolving for everyone. In terms of staffing, yes, you're right, there are a lot of challenges employing both support staff and teaching staff. I think the difference that we've got here is, that, you know, we're not closing any schools in the COCA partnership. We are changing the age ranges of first schools to become primary, and James Calvert Spencer reducing by 2 year groups. I think the principles that we've always had is about the staff and resources following the children, and therefore there are some staff that would be at risk in terms of needing redeployment, and therefore the opportunities that would face those in the first schools as they become primaries. So we're hopeful that all of that will work in the favour of those children and young people as they actually are managed through this transition.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Dodd who wishes to speak as well.
Some of you know I've had some solar panels fitted and I'm over the moon. A day like today, it'll be doing 3 kilowatt. Schools are the ideal place because you know they're open during the day so that we don't have to be draw from much at night. Have we made the provision for solar in all these schools? I know that we did a lot of work years ago, but the technology will have moved on. The green agenda and self-sufficiency would be a real bonus in this day and age. Is that in there? I've looked, but I couldn't find it.
Yeah, in terms we'd be asking Cabinet to make in relation to the new build for James Calvert Spence. Yes, that is included in the new build in terms of being carbon neutral in operation. So it would include solar panels, efficiency in terms of a fabric first approach around the building, additional insulation, etc. So in terms of it's much easier to achieve when you're building something brand new. Some of the heads might know if they've already got solar panels on their buildings actually, so it might be worth them already having that discussion. There is a separate programme around solar PV, different works around boilers, etc. that we do as individual projects in schools. But again, you'll be aware when you're retrofitting these things on schools, you've got to make sure the structure of the roofs, etc. are correct. So they're currently, there are some evaluations going on to see which school buildings would be appropriate to retrofit some of the information. But I don't know if any of the heads have already got solar panels. I'm lacking in that knowledge. They might be able to help you. Paul has.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, lots of nods there, which is very good. Any other comments from Scrutiny? So I've got Councillor Dunbar, and then I've got Councillor Dale who wants to come back again. Councillor Dale, could you switch your microphone off, please? Thank you. Right, Councillor Dunbar.
Thank you. I thought it was a pleasure to read this report. It was absolutely fantastic. You can see from page to page how much work has gone into by the teams at the County Council. And it was also really lovely to read that all the head teachers and all the governing bodies all agree of the way they want to go forward. In this day and age where there's so much conflict and arguments and, you know, nastiness around, it was so pleasing to see that you've got a team of people, the County Council, all working together to provide these children with an education. Everybody's on the same page. And I also really welcome the extra pupil numbers for Barndale Special School, because there's so many children have to travel. It's going to come up in the next item 6, but there's so many children have to travel a long way for special education needs, and it's really welcome to see that it's going to be increased and save a lot of travel for a lot of children, which is really quite difficult, I would say, for them. So really, I've got nothing adverse to say. I just want to echo what Audrey said earlier, that a lot of work's been put into this, and you can see it, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Dale, I'll bring you back in again, and then I'll bring John Sanderson in.
Mine's just a simple question. Is in the building, which obviously we all think is good news, and it's going to be development of a lot of sports areas, is the Church of England having a financial input into the schools the school they run, please?
Sorry, Councillor Dale, I was coughing at some point there and I didn't quite hear what you got to say. Apologies. Was it around Sport England having any input into the
It's just, yes, it's just about the funding for...
Oh, the church, sorry.
For the
Sorry,
school,
it said
for the
sporting
church
grounds,
school?
yeah. No, it's been fully funded by the local authority.
Okay.
John Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of concerns that were raised, minor concerns that were raised by governing bodies. On page 30, the Cork James Calvert Spence governing body had some operational concerns which they wanted to better understand. And then a more understandable one from the Barndale governors on page 32 was the question about whether, as it's a refurb, the facilities would be appropriate for purpose. My question is, have the Barndale governors been reassured and have the James Calvert Spence governing body gained further understanding on those issues?
I'll speak firstly on behalf of Barndale because I think we've got the head of COCA here, so I think Neil might be able to provide you the assurances himself. Because we haven't got Mark here yet, we have had a couple of meetings with Mark to talk about the refurbishment, the changes, etc. So I think he was quite delighted with what he actually saw. The head teachers was also at the meeting, and so nodding in agreement. I'm not just making that up. I think was very pleasantly surprised by what the plans were, the amount of space that would actually be available and the opportunity that brings in terms of redeveloping and designing. Another concern from the governing body was about the rate of expansion and growth, and they really wanted reassurances that that was going to be done in a phased, managed way. And again, that's exactly the way the local authority would want to see it as well. We wouldn't want to be putting 50 children into a brand new provision in day one anyway. We will work up a transition plan actually with the head and the governing body. So I think they're reassured, and I think we're all thinking the same thing anyway. Thank you. If Neil wanted to say anything about specifically James Calvert and whether you're reassured.
Yeah, about the transition, John.
Neil, I think what we'll do is we're going to get you a little microphone so that it can be picked up. Are you all right? Just one moment while Leslie, just take one of those, yeah. We'll just bring a microphone to you and then obviously everyone can hear what you have to say. There we go.
With Sue and the team in order to make sure that that's as smooth as possible, and that actually I think that once we get over a couple of issues around exactly how many mobile classrooms we'll have and what adaptation, if any, we need to the existing high school site in order to house that children, it'll be a welcome to have all the children on one site, because the split site is one of the things that that we know will be eradicated as part of this process and this procedure. That's quite a difficult thing to manage at the moment. So yeah, we're confident that that the conversations that we've had with Sue and the team, that we'll get to an understanding, which means that can be as smooth as possible and with as little disruption, if any, to the education of those children involved.
I think if you just press your button. Any other comments from members of Scrutiny? I'm not seeing any. Just like to clarify something with Sue if I can, and it is on the extra funding. I know you touched on it, but I just want to clarify. We're not taking anything out of reserves for this. The extra 2 million or so is coming from savings on some other projects. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I think if you remember, consultations been through this Fact Scrutiny Committee as well in relation to Seaton Valley, when we were looking to bring two middle schools and the high school together as that partnership. The decision of the Council's Cabinet on that proposal was not to include Seaton Sluice Middle School, and therefore that is what has generated the saving in the budget in order that we can reallocate it to the COCA partnership.
Thank you for that, Sue. So, just on a kind of a final note before we make our decision on this to report to Cabinet, change is never easy, and I think Councillor Dunbar summed up really well the fact that Neil and I will know back in 2017 when I first came to see you about this. It's taken a few years, but we got there. And I think the common golden thread which runs through all of your thinking is the support for our young people and their future, because ultimately you're growing a workforce of the future to university, but well-rounded citizens. And I think you should be commended for that. So please pass that on to your staff. You are the governors. I think exemplary the way that you've contributed to this debate. Everyone might not be happy, ultimately, whatever decision is made, but you've all acted with a common golden thread of supporting young people, and I think that needs to be commended. So I want to thank you for that. So, scrutiny. We have the report in front of us. Chris has been making notes. I just want to assume that I've not heard any dissenting voices. I've heard some comments, some clarification, most of which has been addressed in this meeting. So on that basis, I think it would be fair to assume that we're content that the officer's recommendation to report to Cabinet is as per the 6 recommendations contained on pages 20 to 21. They're in your reports, but ultimately we are in support of officers. I think that would be a reasonable assumption to make. So, Councillor Dale, if you can press your button, please. Thank you.
Keep on pressing it. Will our comments be referred to Cabinet along with our thank you? I think we're good at the note our comments.
Chris is very good at summarising the comments, and those will be picked up. So on that basis, the support from Scrutiny is for Cabinet to make their decision based on the officer recommendation. So I'm happy to progress that. So thank you very much for your deliberation on that, and thank you very much, chairs and governors and heads from the. You're welcome to stay. We've got an exciting afternoon of meetings where you can go back and work with your lovely young people. So we're now moving on to item number 6, which is the Cabinet Report, Send Capacity and Place Planning. That's pages 223 to 280 in your report. We're going to be taking that again.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. Really exciting news, I think, for us as a group of officers to be presenting a few years' work in the making in front of you today. So the purpose of this report is to present to you the Send Capacity and Place Planning Strategy, and that is attached as Appendices 1 to the covering. And this is the first time Northumberland has set out our approach, methodology and process on how we will predict our specialist place planning and capacity growth over the next 5 years. The strategy itself is divided into 6 sections, stating the need for additional capacity, specialist provision, where the increase of places and capital investment has already been achieved. A number of reports have already been through fact scrutiny and Cabinet, where we have been reacting to the growth, and that again is detailed in the strategy. We also set out the forecasting methodology that will predict our future growth. We also do a section around the impact on our local communities across Northumberland and what we're predicting for the future. A further section around ideas and models and timescales for increasing that specialist capacity. And then the final section is around funding, where funding will come from to actually support the implementation of that strategy as well. So really just a bit of context around it, just to say that Northumberland has a very robust mainstream school place planning methodology. Which ensures the accuracy of predicting the number of school places right across the county in our mainstream schools. And again, that is borne out around our parental preferences, and Northumberland being one of the highest performing local authorities across the country consistently for the last 5 years, where above 98% of our parents have actually achieved their first place preferences. However, there has never been a similar sort of approach when it comes to planning specialist provision. And like most local authorities across the country, Northumberland has simply been reacting to the increased demand for places. And again, this is clearly demonstrated in the strategy under section 2. Um, Section 1 of the strategy sets out the detail about how the demand for special educational needs has increased year on year for children and young people, and particularly those under the age of 20. So again, just to highlight, the number of children and young people who have been diagnosed as requiring an education, health and care plan has been increasing steadily. And again, the latest data does show us that 2,650 children and young people had an EHCP, again, which means an overall increase of more than 78% of children and young people have an EHCP now, as opposed to in 2013. To meet this increased demand, significant additional capacity in the county's 9 special schools has been required year on year, and has happened over the last 10 years. This means that we've nearly increased our special school capacity by 500 places, and again, as well as creating additional capacity out of county. And again, a further nearly 100 places has been created during the same period at out-of-county establishments. And again, the details are contained in Table 2 of the strategy. Sorry. Again, that steady upward trend is shown again in graphical format within the strategy. And again, over that 10-year period, looks that we've increased our capacity by 7% each year, whereas, but actually the variation from year to year has been anything from 1% through to about 16% last year. We saw a significant growth over the last 12 months. Again, the financing of mainstream schools, strategy and the effect that has on the demand for special school places, as it's widely acknowledged, as we've already discussed here this afternoon, that there are significant financial pressures on mainstream schools, particularly around supporting special educational needs provision. And in Northumberland, just really to say that we have recognised that, and we did revise our funding model over the current financial year to provide additional funding into mainstream schools to actually support our SEN learners. So again, we are using some strategies in order to address that balance, and hopefully we'll see the impact of that in the coming years. In particular, there's been significant increase in the number of children and young people who have been identified with a primary special need of autism and those with social, emotional and mental health. And I'm sure you've heard me talk many times about capacity growth when we've come and brought proposals around growth in our special schools, particularly for that group of young people. Section 3 of the strategy sets out the place planning methodology to predict the number of specialist places likely to be required over the next 5 years. So again, this sets out a three-stepped approach in order to triangulate some of the data and information. So it sets out how we'll do our annual forecasting by using some of our local intelligence through our Senko network, as well as partnership workshops that we will work with to review the local data and triangulate that information around the impact that we're actually having on the ground in individual schools. The forecasts within the strategy do not include the potential impact of future interventions or strategies, and will therefore be updated on an annual basis, the same way that we do report into scrutiny around our school organisation plan and our predictions for capacity growth. We would plan on doing the same with the SEN strategy, and would look to bring in a revision of this plan on an annual basis so that we can keep track of growth and the impact of our interventions. Section 4 again shows the forecasts of demand for special on a school partnership basis. So again, 15 partnership areas we have used as the basis in order to do those predictions, so that it supports obviously our desire to have our children's needs met as close as home to possible, and therefore breaking it down into smaller geographical areas enables us to plan better for that. So again, the data presented for each school partnership demonstrates there is a growing demand to increase that specialist capacity across Northumberland with a high level of demand set. You know, really, if we look across the whole of Northumberland, those predictions are saying that we would need in excess of a further 700 places by 2026 if our if our demand for special school places continue to grow at the current rate. Section 5 of the strategy sets out how we will achieve that additional capacity, as well as some potential timescales and some very high level costs to achieve that. But again, all of this is subject to detailed work within each of the school partnerships in order to ensure affordability and sustainability of the plans for growth. And again, you've seen evidence of that today in the previous report around the COCUT partnership, that we met the whole of the COCUT partnership, ran SEN workshops, looked at data and actually developed the local solution that all the head teachers could support and actually work together on. And that is why that proposal has come forward today for the COCUT partnership. But again, there's an option and an idea for each of the partnerships within the strategy. Again, what we've also tried to do is to, when we're going out to consult and work with each of the partnerships, we have looked at where there is the greatest demand for growth. And again, you'll see that there's a heat map on page 14 of the strategy that really shows where the density of demand actually is and the growth is. So again, I think it's Audrey that actually pointed out quite rightly that the bright yellow glow in the middle of Blythe is exactly where we're going to be putting our Gilbert Ward new special free school that's due to open in the next academic year. So again, I think that's just a really useful tool for elected members particularly to see why the strategy's starting where it is and where we're ending where we are as well. So really the recommendations and the conclusion to all of this work is that we're asking Cabinet to approve the approach for growth within the strategy in order that we can increase capacity in line with predicted demands in Northumberland and in order, as I've already said, to meet the needs of our children and young people as close to their home communities as possible. What we're also seeking Cabinet approval on is to approve an annual update of the plan to ensure the information used to plan and grow capacity is reflective of the demand for specialist provision. And this will be in the form of an update that would be reported through to this committee on an annual basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Audrey, did you want to come in on the back of this report?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Sue's right. Really pleased to be at this stage where we're able to share this strategy and plan. It allows us to see exactly where our challenges are in Northumberland right now. It allows us to be able to project forward and almost understand a do-nothing situation. If we just continue where we are, allow this to grow and not have specialist facilities or bases, pop-up facilities on a short-term need, then actually we'll be at the point that we're predicting in 5 years. However, this piece of work and the evidence should really give us all of the pointers to be able to make decisions so much earlier and make sure we've got provision. Come back to one of our biggest priorities, which is about meeting needs much closer to home and to really try and ensure that our children are not crisscrossing the county. Inevitably, we will have some travel, but the purpose of this is not just about reducing travel, it's about getting education for our children much, much closer to home and making that decision with the evidence that you see before you today. So really pleased with this, an excellent piece of work that's been undertaken by the team. Very pleased to have it in place, and I'm hoping that the Facts Committee will see that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. So I'm now opening this up to members. I've got Councillor Swinburne who wishes to speak, Councillor Dale and Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I just want to thank all those involved for such a concise and detailed report and the significant amount of work that goes into trying to meet the demand for increasing special education needs across Northumberland, which we need to do. The question I've got, or is it a concern, and I'm not sure whether it's for this committee to answer. My question is, it relates to the increase already in 78% and the projected increase ongoing is why? Why is it increasing so much? Why are the numbers increasing? Is it because everyone's getting better at identifying the need? Or is there some other root cause creating the special education needs? If in the last 9 years we've identified an increase of 78% so far, and we're projecting probably the same again in the coming years, what is it that is creating such a significant, steep demand in special education needs that we are, you know, looking to meet and, you know, get there? What's driving it? What is behind it? As I say, is that a question? Is it a concern? I'm not sure this is the right committee to look into that, but who is going to look into that and find out what's behind it? That's what I'm putting forward at the moment. Thank you.
Double that probably, yeah. we're both chipping. Yes, you're right. there is that identification of need happening better in schools, shall we say. But there was also a change in the legislation as well that gave parental choice greater power, shall we say, in the decision making, and therefore that has created an expectation as well, I think. I think David probably got a few more things to add as well, who also works with it on a day-to-day basis.
I think the first point you made is correct, in that there's better identification, particularly if we look over the longer time. 5, 6, 7 years ago, there would be a number of these through the school system without really having their needs identified, having their needs met either. Not despite the best interest, no doubt, of the individual class teachers working really hard every day to do that, but the growth is reflected nationally. So this is a national issue, about parental, I suppose, expectation, and quite right too, from my perspective. I think parents should have very high expectations for the education system and that it should deliver for their children. But that's gone along, that desire to see a special education need recognised in an individual has led to a lot of parents now going down sometimes paying for professional assessments, etc., which or progressing through local, but really pushing at those to are both identified and recognised. The challenge at the moment for us is, one of the challenges is a thought around, do we really need a diagnosis, a clinical diagnosis of need before we take on and meet the needs of that learner? I think in a perfect world we'd say no, but some parents would say, actually, no, I'm really seeking that diagnosis, because it then strengthens the case to the additional resources that might come with that. We need to try and turn that on its head a little bit. We are getting to a position, there are lots and lots of learners with high levels of special educational need having their needs met in their mainstream school right now, right this minute. And actually, if the technicalities of it is, if the learner is having their needs met in their current school, they don't actually need an EHC plan. The plan is need something above and beyond what the school currently provide. We have got that round robin, though, of the EHC plan often brings some funding with it, which enables to the learner. We need to meet need. We need to recognise what those to home as possible, because that's what's best for our communities and our families. Whether that's a diagnosis or a list of EHC pleas is immaterial. We've got to get to that point. Has given us the capacity to do that, alongside some of the funding changes that we've made in the last year to ensure that those children in mainstream schools with a special educational need are having those needs met, and their schools are being funded appropriately to do so.
Chair, if I could just come back on that. I think that's a very important point that Dave has just made there. There's situations where identifying these additional needs means that the child gets the appropriate level of education. It does not mean that the child is going to be taken out of mainstream education and put in an alternative school. It just means that their needs can be better met. And for anyone who may be watching this, who may be concerned that their child may be not getting the appropriate level or the correct, meeting their needs, and therefore not flagging it up or have concerns, please don't be concerned about that. Please make those requests or raise those concerns so that we can look at providing the best education for your child, because that's what it's all about. Thank you for that, David.
Just before we go on to the next question, I think that I'd actually written that down as something I was going to ask. I think David Street has explained very well that an EHCP, an Educational Healthcare Plan, only needs to kick in if there is a gap or some additional added value that that young person needs in a school. As you've rightly pointed out, a number of young people are being perfectly well supported in mainstream schooling. So I think on that basis, I'd quite like to get a report coming to FACS about the background to that increase so we can look at it, because this report which you've got in front of you is about being reactive. Is about not being reactive, it's about being proactive. It's about actually future-proofing provision for our young people. So I've asked Chris to get something tabled in. The nuance of that we'll discuss after this meeting, but I think there is something that we could bring back to the Scrutiny Committee to look at that increase and what it is, because that might have a knock-on effect on some other Scrutiny Committees within the Council and some work that other partners are doing. So it was just to not forget that one. Right, so Councillor Dale next, then Councillor Ball.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. I was actually going to bring up the 78% because that was the first thing I think we probably all noticed. And just to put into place, I think going back a long time, we used to have policies like the more able policy at schools, where we had high-level learners, but they had different types of learning requirements. And everything's changed quite a lot since then. I think what I was going to ask you was, looking at the forecast, if you look at, say, and I'm just taking Ashington because it's A at the top, and the forecast there is 646. Then you look at Ponteland, there's quite a large variation. And I don't know, that may be something, Wayne, that you could look at or we could actually put into the paper. Actually, why is that such variation? I don't know whether it's school numbers or what or how it's done, but it's quite, can I just say, that's quite a large variation. The other one is, it would be interesting to know how many children are actually being looked after or given education outside of the county council, and whether those are because they have particular needs or very not a need that is not needed throughout the county, something very specific, as against actually because we're not being able to deliver in the county for there's not enough placements. So I just think it would be interesting to know that type of information. But I do have this, it would be interesting to find out the differences, how they come in, whether, I mean, you could say, I don't know, it could be whether it's areas of deprivation, it could be anything. I have no idea, but I think it's something that should be looked at. Could you add that to your...
So I think what trying to get...
Sorry, can I just ask you, could you add that into future work? Because it does look at, without obviously, we need all the facts and figures, but it is something that's quite different.
So I think what I've gleaned out of that one is that are there some geographical variations, or are those geographical variations linked into perhaps more socio-economic variations in particular areas? I don't know if that's something you can answer now, or if that's something that perhaps you want to come back, because it is a question that's been tabled, but it sounds like it's quite an in-depth question. So don't know if you want to have a quick go at that, David. Yeah.
Just very broadly, there is a link nationally, statistically, between deprivation and levels of special educational needs. So that it's not cause and effect, but statistically there is a link. Higher areas of deprivation do have higher areas, higher proportions of special educational needs within them. That is quite a driving factor, but it probably would be interesting to see that broken down into individual areas and how that's representing itself in Northumberland more broadly. Some of the numbers you mentioned before, I think, are individual pupil numbers, Sue.
Yeah.
So again, actually, it could be both size of population and economic factors added together, which has exacerbated that particular gap you saw. I appreciate that there's probably a lot of work that could go on to put.
Can I just come back? I think the thing is that obviously we're looking at inequalities at the moment. I'm on the inequalities working group. And all this type of information really is helpful for everybody to understand what the reasons are and the issues about inequality and what does it drive? Sounds awful, but you know what outcomes can occur if things, you know, it could be degradation, it could be living beside the sea, it could be living on the top of a hill, it could, you know, it could be all kinds of things that added in there. But I think that's something we would like. And the last one was about the numbers who are actually being looked after outside of the county. I think because, can I just say, it gives us a really good perspective as why we want to drive this forward and how good it is.
I'll just bring in Sue Aveston as well there.
Yeah, just to say that obviously the forecast that we've done within the strategy, we very much concentrated on ASD, SEMH. So that's where you might be seeing the variation. It doesn't mean to say there aren't other needs, but obviously we can see this is the greatest demand and the growing need, and that's probably why you're seeing the variation in the numbers. Also within your Ashington Hurst, there's 2 partnerships of schools there, you know, a much larger community than, you know, what you see in Ponteland, and obviously, as you'll be aware, there's over 35% of the population attending Ponteland schools don't live in Ponteland. You know, so all of those little nuances have an impact on the predictions that you're actually seeing within the forecast, and that's why it's really important that we update it on an annual basis so that we can actually see the impact on the interventions. And also post-COVID, you know, one of my responsibilities around exclusions that you've heard me talk about before, you know, that the impact that we're really starting that to have. So all these strategies coming together and looking at this in more detail is definitely the right thing for us to do.
Good. If you could switch your microphone on, please.
Just to add to that, the fact you're saying that people don't come from outside of Ponteland to the school. So are these figures given by the school? I just, because we're going to get into because otherwise we're going to get in a real mess.
So the methodology, if you look at the methodology section of the strategy, it looks at information that the schools give us in terms of their SENCO and what they're actually seeing, and saying actually, you know, as a child is approaching year 5, do we think the child is going to transition into a mainstream secondary provision, or actually is the child going to need some additional support? So we get some of that information from the schools and that intelligence, as well as the intelligence we hold ourselves as a local authority, as well as overlaying some of the numbers and previous predictions to actually triangulate that information. This is very much in its infancy, Councillor Dale, so it will be refined as we actually move over the period of the next 5 years, so that when we're sitting here, you know, predictions are the best guess. So, you know, this is our best guess now. I'm hoping our best guess in 5 years' time, is much closer to reality, shall we say. So that's the journey we're on with this information.
Thank you, Sue. So we'll pick up on that. So that's good. So Councillor Bowler, I've got you next.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is, it's absolutely amazing we're getting these extra spaces going forward. But one, I don't know if it's going to be in a separate report. It's great having extra spaces, but actually the qualifications and the meaningful outcomes for the young people, because we can create spaces, but actually if it's just going to be a level 1 qualification, that's not going to end up having a great impact in their life long term. So it's just with regards to that, do we have any plan for whether it be the media and arts, sports, etc., for any of the young people, because it's great that we've got the places, but if it's not the place where you want to be, it's almost putting square pegs in round holes. Thank you.
I think
Yep.
Audrey might want to pick
sorry.
that up. Do you? Yeah. And then Sue, if you want
Yes.
to dive in.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of aspects to pick up there. So first of all, this is really about where our positions will be for schools within Northumberland. So where we create the capacity to be able to meet need much, much closer to home. There is a separate approach which is around our preparation for adulthood and our pathways to employment. So we know that nationally there is an issue that many children and young people with an EHCP do not go on to long-term sustainable employment. So in Northumberland, we have created, and you remember at this committee that we brought through, for example, the work with Project Choice and the internship. We are just at a point of working with the National Development Team for Internships and Inclusion of receiving some funding to be able to take that forward even further. So our work around the pathways and preparation for adulthood will ultimately lead us to more young people getting into some employment. Currently, our numbers are very, very low. That's not something I'm particularly proud of, but it's the same nationally. And we have committed, in fact, I committed that before I retire, that we will make sure that we have a model and a place in Northumberland. We're working with a number of industries at the moment and getting more and more corporate parent engagement from those industries to be able to support a lot of this work. So once I'm in a position to be able to tell you much more about that and give you some numbers and some concrete detail, then we'll bring that forward to this group.
Thank you, Audrey. And Sue, if you wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, I was just going to draw your attention, obviously, to the COCA agreement, hopefully that Cabinet will approve next Thursday, was actually the co-location and bringing Barndale to Amble, you know, associated right next to the high school. If there's an opportunity for GCSE courses, that opportunity to work together as a group of head teachers, and we're hopeful that model will evolve in the partnership, and certainly one of the desires of the head teachers as well. So actually the physical things that we can do to make the natural things happen as well. So we will be seizing those opportunities to make all of that happen as well. Support obviously the next steps as Audrey talked about as well.
And then I've got Councillor Watson now.
It's perhaps my naivety, and I am just new to facts, but the one thing that stands out in this is in the West there's not a lot of provision, and I do appreciate ours isn't in colour so we can't see the yellow. The concentration might be in certain areas, but if I was a parent in the West and my child was having to travel to Morpeth, to Ashington, I just feel like I'm just a bit confused where it says Prudhoe, no specific need identified, watch and brief. I don't know what that means, and I would imagine in Prudhoe there's lots of parents that are like, where's my child going to go and what's the plan?
Just checking. That's very much the case. That's not the data and the information that's coming through. There is a lot less demand for specialist provision in that area. Again, that should be that in inclusion work that goes on in the mainstream schools, and therefore there isn't that demand for specialist provision. But we will obviously still run a workshop with that, with those head teachers, with that local community to find out actually what that demand is, and if that, that this strategy will be updated on an annual basis. If there is a change in demographic or situation, that information will evolve and we'll bring it. But that information at the moment is telling us that there's very little demand other than what is being met through Hexham Priory currently in the West. Obviously, you'll remember that we moved Emily Wilding Davidson to Ponteland as well. And again, that is closer to the West now as well. So that additional capacity there, we believe, will deal with any growth currently experienced in the west of the county.
And I think to add just to that as well, is that whilst you're looking at that heat map, which shows some of the specialist schools, as David had indicated earlier, mainstream schools are doing a lot of support for some young people. So, and they're kind of hidden in terms of that heat map. But the provision is there, and we've had annual SENCO conferences where special education needs coordinators from all the schools come together. I've been to a couple of them. They're great. They swap and they share ideas. And ultimately, it's about where, as best possible, young people can be supported mainstream. But for those that need that specialist support, it's there. And as Sue's indicated, the heat map would indicate that in some areas, the demand is lower than in areas with higher population. But it's a valid question to ask, and we'll obviously pick that up in some further scrutiny report. Reverend Lennox, I think you wanted to come in as well.
Yes, if I could just return to this significant increase in the numbers. I think David mentioned it was a national trend. How do we compare locally to our local authorities in the northeastern area? And does one impact upon another?
I'm not sure what you mean by the second part of the question, but the northeast is a reflection of the national growth, if not a bit more so. You know, there is growth, but it's actually growth beyond the, say, that disadvantaged measure that I was talking about before, so in and around sort of deprivation, but the growth is greater than that. We could say it's better identification and so on and so forth, but in comparison to our neighbouring local authorities, the work of the central teams and the schools and the parents and the children themselves, of course, is indicating that we are allocating education and healthcare plans within timescale at a much better rate than most of the rest of the North East. It's not perfect, but it's better than a lot of others. And actually, Sue and the team's capacity plan here, again, is another few steps ahead of most of the other North East local authorities. And a lot of them are in a real crisis mode, actually, in terms of provision. We're probably just about at capacity at the moment. Some of our other local authority colleagues have been well beyond capacity for a number of years and don't have this sort of planning aside to at least know what the future should look like or can look like. So in comparison is better than the rest of the North East, probably. But at the same time, we cannot be complacent in any area of our SEND development.
Just in the second part, is there any transition between the different authorities? Are people moving from one to the other because of this?
Anecdotally, I'm aware of some families that have moved, not necessarily because the child has special educational needs, but I have had a few reflections back of folk going, thank goodness we've come here. It's much better than the place that they've in terms of the response, the action of the teams, the work that the school's doing. But I'm not aware of a lot of cross-border movements singularly around seeking special educational needs place, though there has been an increase in other local authorities naming some of our schools in their plans with a view to some children from outside Northumberland, certainly in the southeast, accessing some of the southeast schools. Because in their own local authority, their schools are beyond bursting.
That sounds like a positive message then. Getting something right. And I think it would be fair to mention as well, 2017, when I was a Cabinet Member on Children's Services, one of the big issues was the quality of the EHCP plans. And there was a huge amount of work done by officers to actually improve those documents, because that document is a pathway for young people to progress within the support that they need in school. So I think it needs to be referenced that contextually, this isn't just about officers getting stuff right now. This has been a long time in the planning to come to this, and the EHCPs are a vital tool, and they've been massively improved over a number of years, and the schools are using them as a really good resource to support young people. So, I'm not seeing any other... Oh, Councillor Dunbar, yeah.
You mentioned things from the past. I just remember, I think it was 2017, I asked you to come and see one of my residents, and you brought the Director of Children's Services with you, and she had concerns about a child being schooled outside of the area. If you remember, it was at Connaughton Town Council office. And you've done it. You've all worked together and you've provided this new plan and this research and everything. And it's everything that the lady at the time with her child couldn't get. And I remember the director saying, it might not be helping you now, but it's going to help children in the future. And you've done that. And I'm glad I was at the beginning and I'm near the end. So thank you very much. I'm getting choked up again.
Right. And I inadvertently missed John Sanderson. I didn't know that you were indicating to speak, but I'll bring you in now, so my apologies.
First of all, I have a confession. I was an SEN parent migrant from another authority quite a long time ago, so this process has been happening for quite a while. I think it's a fantastic report. A fantastic amount of information there. I think, as David alluded to there, we're kind of victims of our own success because we've improved how to do EHCP plans, we're intervening earlier. Schools are getting fantastic at it. I think Councillor Swinburne had a really good task and finish group on exclusions a while ago. This might be an opportunity for a similar project. The Ponteland one stands out. Now, there's two things. There's an appropriate curriculum and there's a different curriculum. An awful lot of young people here were looking for a different curriculum rather than an appropriate curriculum. I would say from this report, what the Ponteland information tells us is that they have an appropriate curriculum. What it also tells us is that a lot of schools, particularly in the South East, don't have an appropriate curriculum to suit their cohort. Nationally, I think we've been moving towards a generic curriculum that doesn't suit every area and doesn't suit every school. I would see a task and finish group such as that as an opportunity to look into this and say, right, what's the curriculum in the different schools? Is it the same? In which case, that's an issue. Is it slightly different or does it need to be different? So I guess that's are we able to set up my question is, are we able to set up a task and finish group to look into those points? But generally, a fantastic report with a fantastic amount of information.
That's a very good observation that you've raised there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this up afterwards. But I think you're quite right. This probably does warrant that extra granular piece of work. So we'll pick that up afterwards. Yeah. So great. Thank you for that. So I'm conscious to bring this to an end, but Councillor Dale, I'll quickly bring this in.
Actually, do you know more about what's happening in Predator and Ponteland? I know people who are involved in Ponteland. Actually, it might be worth actually finding out because they do have special people who come in, and I know who they are. But whether that's anything to do with it, and actually they've got more funding, or what, I don't know. But it would be quite nice to see exactly the difference between the various high schools and what their impact, what they spend, etc. Because I do know we've got special people going in who are really good, being brilliant, and they're going in for 2 days a week, 3 days a week, and helping. And also in Predator, the same thing. So it might be just worth having a look and seeing what you're saying about the curriculum being correct. Maybe they actually got more funding going into them, or what, I don't know.
So I'll pick this up with officers after scrutiny. We'll thematic work there, and then I'll feed back to scrutiny members. But thank you, John, for raising that. So you have the cabinet a cabinet report in front of you, which is going to cabinet, I think, on the 17th of November. There are two key things that we need to have looked at, which is to look at the approval for the growth strategy, but also ensure information used to plan and grow capacity is reflective of demand. So I think we've had a good discussion. I think we've got a couple of things which will come out of this, which will be fed back to Cabinet. I'm not seeing anyone objecting or any contention to this. So on that basis, I think it would be fair for Chris to write a report to Cabinet and saying that we're in support of and what scrutiny is going to do in addition to this to help support the plan going forward. So I think that is a nod of agreement from everyone there. I go back to the substantive agenda, which is the Family and Children's Overview and Scrutiny Committee Work Programme, which Chris Angus is going to take us through, page 281 to 292.
Thanks, Chair. Just to say that the transport review that was deferred a couple of months ago will be coming in December. As Sue said, the National Funding Formula report will be coming in January, and the school admissions report will be coming in February, which is about the numbers for each of the schools. And I will discuss with Wayne and officers about an additional report around SEND and the possibility of doing a task and finish group. But other than that, the work programme is just to note.
Thank you very much for that. I've not been notified of any urgent business, so on that basis, thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and we'll see you at the next meeting, which is not listed in here. It is when?
It is the 1st of December.
1st of December. We'll see you 1st of December. Thank you for your time.